Well, Thorpe was one of the men that instigated this whole upper Mississippi area. And so it was christened with a bottle of sparkling water because it was during Prohibition.
Oh, okay.
And it was run by the Federal Barge Lines. It's a towboat. It pushes barges. Have you seen them go up and down the river? Okay, so it pushes barges from St. Louis up to St. Paul, filled with everything from oil, coal, gravel, even sugar. And it did that until 1940. Now in 1940, the Federal Barge Lines commissioned some new boats to be built, and they sold off their older boats in their fleet. Boats that had paddle wheels on them. And so they sold this boat to a steel company by the name of Armco Steel.
Okay, I see the sign up there.
And Armco Steel was out of the Cincinnati area, and Armco changed the name of the boat to George M. Verity because that was the president of their company.
Oh, okay.
So they named it after him. And they also took it off the Mississippi River at that time and put it on the Ohio River. And for the next 20 years, this thing would go clear on out to West Virginia and that area and pick up coal and deliver it to the steel mills. They pushed over 100 million tons of coal while it was on the Ohio River. And so that's what we've got here is one gigantic teapot. The guy that worked in here was called the fireman. And he would light up these burners and get this glowing cherry hot. And he had rheostats over on the side forcing air in, so he had a nice hot fire to boil water, produce steam for about 10 different steam engines on board. This was a hot, miserable, rotten, dirty, no good job. I'd say it'd be about 130 degrees in here, and you'd have the steam escaping at you all the time, and it was just dangerous too. You had to watch these boilers because they could explode if they got too much pressure inside, but it was actually oil.
Really?
It was a real thick, heavy oil, so thick that they had to preheat it. They said it was done with their shift, or where they were off. They might be found down here sitting on a bench or a bale of hay and getting a nice little breeze through these big open doors.
Okay, yeah.
Felt pretty good on those hot, stuffy days in the Midwest. Now this is where they would store their cargo, you see. This beam here is up on rollers, and so this entire thing could extend out like a huge arm to either direction. And then you could hook things on and bring in crates and barrels, heavy machinery, motors, stuff like that. And this, they would carry anything. It didn't matter how big or how small it was. If some farmer down in Hannibal had a pig that he wanted to send to his cousin in Keokuk, they'd take it. And it was about 1/10 the charge of what the railroad was getting.
Oh, okay.
So it was a pretty economical way. So this room was filled with a hodgepodge of goods, all kinds of things. There might be barrels of whiskey and bolts of cloth. There might be crates of chicken and a pig or two running around. You just never knew. Now over here you have a steam engine. And this steam engine would be used to turn this thing. This is called a capstan.
Yes.
The capstan is a rotating drum that would pull the, say they wanted to pull the boat sideways, they could tie off on the dock, wrap a line around here, start this up, and this would begin to turn, and it would reel you right over there. Now there's two more steam engines like this that are found up in the front of the boat in compartments. And each one of these steam engines has a capstan sitting out there, and that pulls the barges up to the front of the boat. Then you kind of zigzag them together like your shoelaces, and down the river you go. Well, by 1960, this boat was old-fashioned. It was out of date. It was heavy. It was slow. It took a huge crew. All good reasons to tear it up for scrap metal. And they would have had it been named the Susie Q or the Puddle Jumper. But it was named after the president of their company, and they didn't want to tear up their president. That's it. They were really proud of George M. Verity, and they did things with this. It was kind of their flagship. They did some remarkable things for this boat. So they just took it off the river. They didn't really know what to do with it. Now, at the same time, Keokuk was looking to buy a boat to have for a museum down here. So we sent some guys down there and we bought it. We had to pay top dollar. By top dollar, I mean $1. And they delivered it for that too.
Wow.
So it's been a museum since 1961. And I can't take you out on the river with it because it doesn't float anymore.
Yeah.
We have holes in the hull, it's fastened down because we get terrible floods here on the Mississippi River. 100-year floods that come about every 10 years. Now in 2008, water was this deep inside here.
Holy smoke.
In 93, it was up to here. So if you look at the pictures under the clock, you'll see a statue that you drove by when you drove in that parking lot. And that'll give you an idea of what the floodwaters were like.
Wow.
There's 2008 over there.
Gee. Yeah, that's
If we didn't have
deep.
it anchored down, you'd have to visit us in Louisiana. They got their water right out of the river.
Okay.
Now the water has to be purified to be used in the boiler, but their drinking water they also filtered. Thank God. Mark Twain made the comment that after years of being a riverboat pilot on the Mississippi, he couldn't drink a regular glass of ice water. He had to add a teaspoon of mud to it. For years they would use a condenser, and they would condense the steam and get their potable water that way. They'd buy block ice and store it in here. This is a refrigeration unit that used ammonia as a coolant, and that would keep this ice nice and frozen. They'd also send cold air up, and they had a walk-in freezer for food up there. Sends this thing down the river. These quick big cylinders here produce 700 horsepower each. These are Nordberg engines. And they'd fill up with steam and push a piston out 6.5 foot stroke.
Wow.
So they would alternate. So this side would go, and then this side.
Huh.
And then so you had that locomotive type action going on, and that would be pushing that white pitman arm, that slanted arm there, would be going like the pedals on a bicycle and turning the wheel, the paddle wheel that was in the back. There's a fellow right here that worked, and he was called the chief engineer. And it was this guy that controlled how fast the boat would go down the river. He could go half speed or slow or full. He could stop it dead in the water. But the thing he couldn't do, he couldn't see anything. So he had to rely on his pilot to tell him how fast to go. Now they communicated through this speaking tube right here. This goes all the way up 3 stories to where the pilot is, and of course it wasn't the best design. And so they later put in.
Why did they put it so low?
I don't know.
You could move it,
I don't know.
get it up here. The guy didn't have to bend over.
And they later put in an ET, which is an engineer's telegraph. So there's one of these upstairs in the pilot house, and he sets it, and then that alerts this guy to what he's supposed to do. It dings a bell in here, and then he comes over here, uses these 4 rods here to control the speed and the direction. So this doesn't actually change the speed.
Right.
It's just another way
Just
of alerting them.
alert them.
And then much later on in the lifetime of this boat, they actually had a phone that they used to talk with each other, which was probably a major step up in being able to hear each other. Be a diver. Usually what he was diving for was to go into the paddle wheel, because as that thing turned, it'd pick up debris, sticks, weeds, barbed wire, all kinds of stuff. He'd have to clear that out. He would wear heavy lead boots and maybe a belt to keep him down in a good current. And he got his air through this breathing tube, which led to this compressor. Now this was outside on the deck, and 2 of his best friends in the world pumped air to him while he was under the water. Here you have the steering mechanism of the boat. You see this little pipe? That goes up, over, and it winds its way up to the pilot house. The pilot steers the boat up there by moving 2 bars back and forth. That would turn this, and it would push this forward to engage the steam cylinder. So you have steam helping you at that point to move these big arms. The big arms go down to the rudders. And the rudders are what actually turn the boat. And there's actually 3 of them, but when they pulled the boat in, they removed one of the rudders and put it outside so you could get a good look at it. It was a laundress. The men worked a square shift of 6 hours on and then 6 hours off. And each one of these rooms originally had bunk beds in them. The men, this room actually had 2 sets of bunk beds. And they would hot bunk it. So when they got out, someone else came right into those bunks and slept in there. Yep. So you had the bathroom over there, more rooms. This was a refrigerator. This is a walk-in freezer. I'm in the kitchen now.
Okay.
And the cook would prepare 4 meals a day for the different shifts. And they were pretty hearty meals. It said that after a while, the men would develop a steamboat figure. Captain's bedroom, the pilot's bedroom, and the engineer's bedroom. They did not have to share their rooms. And they were far away from the noise of the pilot. Paddle. These stairs, that's on the boat, those are called knees. And they push up against the barges. And they let the deckhands climb up onto the barges. Now the old bell here, I'm going to ring it. The old bell is, still says SS Thorpe on it. You see, the bell is said to be the soul of the ship. And they were somewhat even superstitious about the bell in that they never messed with it or fooled with it at all. Not even so much. At one time, at the very end of this boat's life on the river, they had radar. This would have been located up in the pilot house, but we moved it down here. This wasn't built until 1957 or 58, I forget. And so this boat was off the water by 1960. So you can see it was barely used at all. Now this is a model that shows how they used to make wing dams on the river. We still have wing dams, these wing dams, but we don't make them out of mats of sticks. Now we're up in the pilot house, and your pilot would sit in this chair and use these 2 bars to steer the boat. They'd turn those big rudders that we saw downstairs. And he would have steam to help him. Right now this rudder is broken, so it turns real easy, and that one is real stiff and hardly turns at all. So these controlled the white lights that you would see out there, those searchlights, and this was communication with the engineer.
Seemed like he had a long reach to those.
Well, you know, he could stand. A lot of times he stood and did this.
Okay.
And the purpose of 2 was that he could get over here and watch the.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, and they turned together. You know. There's a speaking tube that would talk with the engineer. And a bell rope up here. And this was actually connected to the steam whistle. Okay. In back you have a loafer's bench where the captain could have guests come up. It wasn't for the deckhands or the
okay.
These ship's wheels that you see were never used on this boat at all. They always used bars on this boat. They were donated to the museum. This particular ship's wheel was made in Keokuk and used on the Stella in the 1800s. They were still making steamboats with ship's wheels well into the 1900s, and they would. The largest was the largest wheel I'm talking about was on the Sprague, which was called Big Mama, and that was down in the southern, the lower Mississippi, and the Sprague had a ship's wheel that was 12.5 feet diameter.
Wow.
they cut a groove here, and half of it was up above here.
Yeah.
And they had a brake system where you'd have to jump on it, and that would break that wheel from turning too fast. You know, if wind suddenly hit that just right, you know, you can imagine that wheel start to
Oh
spin.
yeah. That'd be-
All right, so that completes the tour of the Georgian Verity.